You have been there in the country very recently. Why do you think that after almost 6 months of relative stalemate, the rebels appear to have taken most of the capital in just 3 days?
Well, it's been reported in the Daily Telegraph that essentially the British Army have literally blown a path for the rebels from Zawiya to Tripoli. And I was saying this a couple of days anyway, and the Daily Telegraph has confirmed this. This whole operation, and it's interesting what Lindsay German says before. She still has some sympathy with the rebels, like they are some kind of independent force. They are not. They have always been in the pockets of Western intelligence services, and this whole conflict has been engineered through a concerted campaign by Western governments since the beginning in mid-February, and it's the same now in Tripoli. NATO Apache helicopters and jets have literally massacred and blown a path for these rebels to get into Tripoli.
Are you saying then this isn't the wish of the majority of the Libyan people for this to have happened, for a change in regime, and indeed if they wanted that wish, they needed help from outside, from NATO?
Absolutely. Now, look at the images very carefully from Zawiya and from Tripoli, and even Western mainstream media is admitting that no civilians are coming out in support of the rebels. All the shutters, all the shops, all the houses are shut down in Zawiya, and they're shut down in Tripoli. Now, the rebels think they've got Gaddafi's compound, but last night's battle, round one, went to Gaddafi, because they said they had Mohammed Gaddafi and Saif al-Islam. Hey presto, Saif al-Islam is smiling, driving around Tripoli. So perhaps, like last night, tonight is another trap for the rebels in the compound, that Gaddafi's forces are allowing all these dozens and scores of rebels into the compound, and let's see what happens tonight. And you know, it may be another big trap for the rebels in Tripoli.
Now, human rights organisations say that Libyan civilians must be protected during this time of conflict. Now, you have been there, you've just returned very recently. Is that really possible to do that when the situation is so confused now?
Listen, this has been rank hypocrisy from the part of all those countries. Some of the countries were fooled into supporting the no-fly zone and this so-called, protecting civilians. But since day one of the bombing of the NATO operation, they have been massacring civilians. And most infamously in Zlitan just 2 weeks ago, it's been confirmed it was the RAF, the British RAF, that conducted that massacre of 85 civilians, including 35 children. Nothing to do with protecting civilians, everything to do with dominating Libya.
But civilians do die in war, don't they? It's a sad, tragic fact. And you're not saying that was a deliberate target, those civilians, are you?
There is a clear program of state terror. This is the business which NATO is involved in Libya, in Afghanistan, and anywhere else it operates. It's state terrorism, pure and simple.
So what then, the future? You mentioned Afghanistan and indeed the future of Libya. Could you compare the two? And with Iraq, for example, are the same mistakes going to be made?
These are not mistakes. These are deliberate policy. These are deliberate strategies on part of Western governments. And the rest of the world, especially the Arab world, would do well to recognize NATO for what it is. After Libya, Syria is next, Hezbollah in Lebanon next, and Palestine is coming up. That is why the Americans brokered a peace between the Palestinians and Israel through Egypt, because the last thing the West wants is this whole conflict to be focused on the real common enemies of the Arabs, which is the state of Israel and the Western governments backing it.
So you're saying that the West really wants to see the political turmoil, the violence that we've seen in Afghanistan and Iraq happening in Libya, and indeed will that happen, do you think?
Well, what's been clear in the last few days, and it's been admitted by the Daily Telegraph, that yesterday was planned all along for weeks by the NATO forces. So yes, they want to wrap up Libya, wrap it up nicely to present it as a successful test case to then roll on Syria. So it's all dependent on whether Gaddafi and his people can resist NATO here. Because if they can resist NATO in Libya, they won't be coming for Syria. And Gaddafi himself said in a speech just under a month ago that his resistance against NATO is defending Syria and Iran as well.
You talk of Gaddafi, what a fate awaits him? And indeed, who should determine that fate?
This has been such, I mean, the gross illegality of what's gone on in relation to Libya by NATO is unbelievable. Already the Libyan guy at the United Nations, Mr. Shalgam, has basically admitted in Arab press that he fooled people, and this whole thing has been an illegal, affair, an operation. Protecting civilians, rubbish.
Just very briefly, I just want to ask you that you're back in Brussels now, and you've just recently left Tripoli, and I know that you've got some colleagues, some journalists who you do know they're trapped in the hotel, the Rixos Hotel, which has been mentioned many times. That's where the international media are at the moment. Are you concerned for their safety?
Of course, and anyone would be concerned for their safety, especially their close friends and family. But these are international journalists, these are professional journalists, and they have to be respected as such. And if some of them want to be evacuated, then their country of origin should facilitate in that. These are Western journalists who are from NATO countries. So if NATO wants to protect their own civilians, their own nationals in Tripoli, well, here's your chance.
But where's the threat coming from? From the rebels or from the Gaddafi loyalists? Just briefly.
I think the threat more is coming from the rebels, really, because these are Western journalists who've been based at the Rixos Hotel for many, many months under the protection of Gaddafi's regime.
We'll leave it there. That's all we got time for. Freelance journalist Sukhan Chandan joining us live there in Brussels. Thanks for your time.